Hi, everybody. Amber is on her way to log in, and we are going to get started with the questions that all of you asked over on Instagram. I do have a little explaining to do. Yesterday, Amber and I recorded an hour and 15-minute talk about answering all the questions that you had asked. We decided to divide it into two parts, thankfully so, because the Zoom recording yesterday did not record. And I spent, I was number 98 in the queue with Zoom last night, trying to figure out where it was at. And it recorded 2 minutes and 26 seconds. And then we had something go on and it wasn't there anymore. So this is actually going to be a re-recording of the podcast of our talking yesterday. It was really a bad day for me in the end because I was so frustrated and I got in a little tiny tip with my husband. He came out and wanted to talk to me and he was standing right over there. And I went like this, and he thought I was just chatting with Amber. He did not realize that we were recording. So we hung up and he had moved to this doorway. And I said, were you just going to stand there and bust into the recording? We had words and I recorded all of that. So then I spent hours on Zoom last night trying to figure out where the original recording went. It was just a big kerfuffle yesterday. And so now Wednesday, it is no longer Cinco de Mayo, but part 2 was recorded in Cinco de Mayo. So we're going to put this up as part 1 and part 2. Just know that part 1 was re-recorded after part 2.
I put the same dress on. I thought that's what we were doing.
I could have done that, but well, I have a 4 o'clock Zoom, so I have to be dressed, and I thought I should probably be ready for that. So I was gathering some stuff. So I will be on today at 4 o'clock for me, my time, with the Flying Needles Yarn Shop. So we have to get this re-recorded before then. So Amber was in at work and scrabbling to get home to redo this. I don't think I've ever re-recorded one from the beginning.
It does say record in the corner now. And so I will always pay attention to that now. That way we're on the same page.
Right. Yeah. And when the guy asked me yesterday, I said it was recording at one point. Whether or not it always said that, I can't swear by that. And he said, right. Well, you have 3 minutes on that recording. And I said, well, yeah, that's not near enough. Yeah. And then I said, let me go check the meeting numbers. And I accidentally hung up on the text chat that I had been in, waiting behind 97 people in line. Right. And it said text ended, chat ended. And I was like, no, because I was still wanting to kind of talk to him a little longer.
Right.
About what had gone wrong. It was probably user error, not necessarily Zoom error. We should have looked throughout and it had just stopped recording. So anyway.
Well, really quick, on part 1, last time we did not introduce ourselves. So are you going to do re-recorded number 1 and then number 2?
Yes.
So I'm Yarnhoarder. You can find me as Yarnhoarder on Instagram and Amber Lindemann on Ravelry.
And I'm Cori Eichelberger, and I'm Irocknits, and Irock is Cori spelled backwards, and I knit in a rocking chair, almost exclusively. So, and Amber and I both have podcasts on YouTube, as well as Ravelry groups and Instagram feeds that you can feel free to follow. So yeah, we did not do that yesterday. And I did not put up part 2 because we referred to part 1 several times in part 2. So although it's uploaded to YouTube, I didn't put it up. I thought that would just be even more confusing.
Yep.
So here we go. We are going to, the first question that people have sent in is, I love your friendship, but how did you two meet? And I let Amber tell most of that story yesterday, so she's going to tell it again.
I forgot that I told this one. So I think we decided it was 2015. Whenever I decided that I was going to go to the Zombie Knit Apocalypse retreat in Rochester, Minnesota, all by myself. It was, and I remember I almost didn't go. I woke up that morning and I was super, anxious. You don't want to go. You're not going to know anybody. It's 8.5 hour drive one way. And anyway, I decided to go, and it was great because I made so many friends. But when I got there, I just decided that I was not going to sit in the corner and be that person who just knitted and didn't make any friends. And so I just plopped myself down at every table. And it took a while because as Cori mentioned yesterday, some tables have introverts in them. And so exclusively an introverted table. And I'm not introverted at all. And so it would have been difficult to have, fit in perfectly at that table. So I just kind of moved from table to table to table until I found the perfect fit. And it was Cori's table that I ended up staying at and laughing, and we just really hit it off. We made each other laugh. You could tell that we, kind of had the same personality, and it was really great. Oh, shoot.
Yep.
Okay, so Heidi is not home. She is mowing my niece's house. And so that might happen occasionally, and I'll try to push mute. It usually only lasts a second because then Frank runs downstairs. So he's up here. I've closed the blind, but he'll still do it. So anyway, I was sitting at Cori's table, and we ended up sitting and laughing with other friends until after,
all hours. That first night, I don't know if it was 1 or 1:30 when most of the room had left and we were still sitting at that table. But,
it was just really great. And I know we talked about yesterday how it's not that we were immediately, it's not like we're like, whoa, I found a new best friend. It wasn't that at all. It was just, we really liked one another. And then we stayed in touch. We followed each other on Instagram. We chatted back and forth. I saw her again at the January fall retreat that following year. We saw each other again at Knitting Pipeline, which was in Illinois that February. And then she invited me up to stay at her house with my daughter in May of that year. So, for Shepherd's Harvest. And then ever since then, we've been closer friends than we were there at the very, very beginning. So it's been really fun. So yeah, we just kind of I stumbled upon her at a knitting retreat, and she was gracious enough to say, yeah, you're not too crazy. You can sit here. And that was really great.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how many people can say that their friendship began at a knitting retreat, but I know that we have two friends whose friendship began as exclusively, and they're besties now, and they met originally at a knitting retreat.
And I met them, both of them, at the knitting retreat. I met Stacy, I met Jenny, I met all the people came from that I've gone to, which has been really great. Now granted, maybe some of them I knew on Instagram ahead of time or had heard of them, but the majority of them I met up at ZK, which has really been a blessing.
Okay. The second question here is, how are you all doing coping in these crazy times? How do you stay strong and positive? And we're not staying strong and positive every day. We're not. We need to be really honest and upfront about that. We have both had really rotten days, and so have some of our friends, where everything just seems to be kind of negative. You're down, you're sitting in the chair, you don't really want to knit, you're kind of angry at whoever you happen to have in the house with you, or whoever is on TV, or whoever you're watching on the podcast isn't getting you out of your funk. Like they're just not doing it like they normally would. It's been tough. We try to stay positive. We try to, keep our spirits up and laugh and things, but there are times when we just bow out of, company and texts and say, for today, I'm having a grumpy day, which is really hard. Like when your husband comes home and he goes, how was your day? And you've had the bad day. When on other days, he might have had a bad day, and he comes home and it doesn't have anything to do with what has actually happened in that day. It's the whole world situation that is causing that, I think, for most people: anxiety, stress, depression, all of that.
Yeah, I read the news, and then that's what does it for me, is then I spiral, right? I know that our officials have our best interests in mind, but it doesn't matter that that's what they have in mind when you continue to push the date later and later. And I know that they couldn't say this is going to be until July or this is going to be until August, because people would have revolted, right? But it's okay, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks, 2 more. And so you think you've got that light at the end of the tunnel, and then it moves again. And my life hasn't really changed that much, to be honest, but it's still sad. It's sad for the business owners. It's sad for the elderly. It's sad for the people who haven't seen their families. It's sad for the workers. I mean, it's sad for everybody, right? Like, it's just the people who
your whole life maybe hasn't changed as much, but for sure you're sewing masks. You're doing stuff with your business that's different than before. So that is all different. That, that part has all changed.
And so, it's just, that's the part, it always gets me down. And so I try not to, so if I had to say, how could you stay positive? I'm trying not to read the news is the big thing. I do have some occasional breaking news that comes across my phone, and I wish I knew how to turn that off because I would, but yeah. So no, we are not staying positive. We try to cheer each other up, and we try to check on our friends, but there are lots of bad days right along with the good ones. So you're not alone.
Yeah. I had 2 Fridays that were just down days for me. And then that's those, after the second one, I kind of made a plan and said, okay, every couple of days I have to have something to do, something that's going to engage me. I'm going to have a plan. Like today I drove across the city and drove with my daughter to the taco place because we didn't go yesterday for Cinco de Mayo. And then we ate tacos, and it's 45 minutes to see her. But I knew that I had a plan for today, right? And so I made sure that that was in the midst of my week. Otherwise, I'm home every day alone in the house until my husband gets home from work with the dog. And I'm a people person. We're both extroverts, and I fill up all my energy with people. So I definitely need to have some things throughout my day that caused me to have a reason to get up in the morning. Okay, next question. Which blanket pattern should I knit or crochet to use up my stash of Knit Picks Felici? We had different viewpoints about that yesterday, so we're gonna both share what we thought.
So I love the Granny Stripe Afghan. It's from Attic 24. It's on Ravelry, or it's just on the internet. If you Google Granny Stripe Afghan Attic 24, it will take you to her website, and she's got step-by-step photos. I think it's beginner friendly. There's a little confusing on the edges, but it's you kind of get the hang of it if you stick with it, and it is really great. You can knit it in fingering weight. The pattern is written for DK. I've also held a natural with it and made it worsted 2 fingerings, and since that Felici yarn is self-striping, it's going to change colors as you go, which is going to be really nice. If you don't hold it double, the colors will be brighter. If you do hold, I don't mean doubled. If you just knit it or crochet it by itself, it's going to be, the colors are going to stand out more. If you hold a natural colored or a light gray or something with it marled and make it a worsted weight yarn, it's going to tone down those colors a little bit, which maybe you want because it gives a little continuity to have that single color that's the same all the way through. But that is really nice. I should have brought it up. I didn't. I can show you a picture of it on my phone because it's downstairs. I just washed it. I finished Heidi one not too long ago, and my internet is just loading.
Oh yeah, that's probably because the Zoom taking too much time. I'll show mine. It's right here.
Okay. Well, you show
the one
there. Yep.
This is the one that I'm holding 2 strands together. So a skein of, big giant skein of cream colored yarn or natural yarn on a cone, and then I'm alternating in, and that really tones down the entire look of the blanket you're making. However, I'm making a fisherman's rib blanket, which I think if you're a knitter, not a crocheter, is the way to go. Because it's very, very squishy. It feels like a brioche stitch. It has a lot of kind of a cush factor to it. And the stitch is knit one in the row below. So you do that for the entire blanket. There's nothing to learn. It's 1 stitch to knit into the row below and bring it up. And once you do that on the setup row, it's very easy to read your knitting and see which stitch is the actual stitch that you knit into the row below, because it's the one that looks like the knit. It looks like it has a kind of a backwards kind of a purl stitch with a V going into it in between, and then it's reversible on the other side. This is a little bit tedious over time because you're working on it, but it's easy knitting to do while you're watching TV or sitting at a knitting group or whatever. I've taken it to knitting group a number of times. But I would say that Amber's, the granny stripe, she taught me how to do the granny stripe blanket, and repeatedly taught me how to do the granny stripe, like wrote it out for me. And I still struggle because I can't quite read crochet yet to turn the rows and to know what to do on either end. There.
So there, that kind of shows you how it's all completely different colors. I know it's not in focus, but it's all, but because I held that white throughout, it kind of gives it a little bit like what Cori said, you know, when she was holding hers up, kind of gives it a little bit of a faded look. I have a question about yours. Is there a video tutorial for the knit in the row below?
Oh, yes. Yes.
So it would not even be difficult to, you know, to start that. Like if you have questions about that one stitch, there's a video.
Yeah. Yep. And all you're doing is putting the tip of the needle into one stitch down and grabbing the bar and the loop at the same time. So you're going in just one little, I could show you if I turned this around, but anyway.
Well,
yeah, oh, absolutely.
Have you found that blanket has gotten harder on your elbows or anything as it's weighed more, or because it's in your lap? No.
It is harder to turn, but I stopped flipping it now. Now I'm just rotating.
Twist it? Yeah.
Okay. Twisting it instead of flipping it. When I started, I would flip the whole thing. Now there's enough, you know, it goes on forever here.
Right.
See?
Oh, I can't wait to see it finished.
But yeah, I used to flip it. Now there's enough length that I can just turn the top part back and forth and the rest rests in my lap. So no, and I'm not finding it heavy to hold up either, because you know most of it's resting. So yeah, I haven't really found that to be an issue. I'm almost done. I'm getting really close to being done, and then I have to do the I-cord border around it. But
I think you started that last fall when you got into a sorting your mini skein thing.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't think you've been working on it that long at all.
Yeah. Oh no. And I've set it down for long periods of time to do other design work.
No, I know you started it right. I know it had nothing to do. Hi, everybody. We're going to go off on a tangent. I think you started right before you went up to the cabin when you were working on that beautiful Jill Draper sweater.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I took it with me. August. This Jill Draper sweater.
Yeah. So it'll be less than a year.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Oh, and it could have been done if I wouldn't have had made other commitments to myself to do other work. I exclusively started just taking it to knitting group because it was just a perfect thing to take. Then it gets kind of big to take to knitting too, because it's, you know, and I just keep carrying this little bag of, I add some minis to it and just carry around something to add next. But you did have a good idea to take a picture, remember?
Yeah. So when you're doing, are you talking about when you hold it up?
Yes.
You're starting with your Felici blanket. We'll get back to the original question. When you have that, I'm assuming you don't have all the same skein, right? You don't have 20 balls of the same color. You have all different balls of all different colors. So when that's the case, you think it looks really great as you're doing it, but you need to take a picture of it and step back and look at it, because then when you look at the photo, you can tell what color you need. So when I was doing Heidi's, like I held up a picture and I'm like, oh, I need yellow, because, you know, there was no yellow in it. And Cori was knitting on that blanket that she just held up. And I said, oh, hang on, because we were chatting, FaceTiming. And I said, oh, hang on, back up and I'll take a picture of it for you. And I sent it to her and she was like, oh, I need pink. And I'm like, in my head, I was thinking she needs pink. But that's hard for me because maybe I just think you need pink because I like pink, but then you said it too, right? So it was, yeah, that was cool. So if you take pictures of it as you go, you can kind of make sure that it's pleasing, right? And you're not missing a big chunk of no color.
Absolutely. That was a great tip, because yeah, you took it for me while we were FaceTiming that day. And now I have laid it out and taken pictures several times since. I had to get up. I had a tickle and I thought, I'm just going to cough and cough and cough here if I don't get actual water. So my water bottle was just right there. Okay.
What are your favorite? My cup that I'm using.
Oh, she got her new cup from me. What are your favorite knitting needles to work with, material and brand? Oh, this was a good question because we are the opposite on this one a little bit. So
Yep.
it's kind of fun to discuss this.
I like metal needles exclusively. I don't knit with any wood. I did buy a set of wood needles and then gifted them to Cori because I didn't like them at all. Even slippery yarn, I'll still use a metal needle. So that's just my preference as far as material goes. And as far as brand goes, I will use any needle. I will use an $8 needle, and I have used a $50 needle, and they're all just knitting needles to me. I don't have a big preference specifically, unless it kind of depends on the project that I'm working on. Sock needles, my favorites are Haya Sharps. They have a very pointy tip, like almost signature needle pointy tip. And it's an $8.80 needle. So, I mean, if you are like super jealous because you can't justify spending money on a signature needle and you've always wanted one, try a Haya Sharp, because they are so sharp. They poke holes in my fingers if I'm not careful. And so they're really sharp needles at a super good price point. And then if I'm knitting something other than socks, I really like Chowgu needles because the cord is very substantial. It has flexibility to it. It's not like it's, you know, unable to bend, but when you're holding up a whole sweater, or like Cori, if I were going to knit that or that Fisherman's rib blanket that you have, I would use Chowgu needles because, you know, it's a big blanket on that sturdy needle. So yeah, sturdy cord. So yeah, my favorite Haya Sharps, because I knit mostly socks. I really like Chowgus, but I have lots of needles, like an exorbitant amount of needles, and I really love them all. And I think I mentioned yesterday too, I really like Knitter's Pride Nova Platinas. They're super, super slippery. I have had, full disclosure, I have had the coating peel off of one before, and I had to throw it away. I'm not the kind of person who's ever going to contact the company and ask for my money back on a $5 needle that I have used a million times, because, you know, I just throw it away and buy another one. So maybe they would have replaced it. I don't know. I didn't ask. But again,
I'm sure they would have, but I get it, right?
Yeah. But again, I'm looking at, you know, I got $5 worth of use out of that needle, so I didn't care. And I may very well have done something stupid to it. So I still highly recommend those Nova Platinas as well. And Knitter's Pride has a lot of really great needles. And what I really like about it is their cords are interchangeable with all other Knitter's Pride needles. I'm pretty sure that's true.
Oh yeah. I haven't found cords that aren't interchangeable hardly. I screw cords into different needles all the time. And I really haven't found anything that isn't applicable. And I use exclusively wood needles. I learned 40 years ago, not quite, but on a straight needles, and they were wood, and that's, or plastic is what we had. And we were just starting to get circular needles back in the day. I know that's probably hard for people to believe that there weren't circular needles, but the technology wasn't even available for a good circular needle at the time. And so when I learned on wood, then I learned how to push the tension on wood, and nothing ever slid around. So, but I have a lot of hand trouble and hand and wrist pain, not from knitting, but from doing gymnastics from the time I was 8 until I graduated from college. And so I have overuse syndrome, but it comes from the gymnastics. I like to say that it's the gymnastics, not the excessive amounts of knitting that I probably do that has aggravated it.
Caused by gymnastics and inflamed by knitting.
Yes, there we go. But we won't tell the doctors that. Anyway, right. So I like using Knitter's Pride Cubics. They're square needles. It is similar to writing with a yellow pencil, where you have a hexagonal shape to that pencil, and they did that for kids to grip on a flat surface, as opposed to a pencil that is completely round. You know, now if you have round pencils, we often buy grippers for kids when they're learning how to write, because you hold it so much tighter if it's round. And that is the theory behind square needle. So if I have a choice, I will always choose a square needle. Now, Knit Picks has square needles, and I have a lot of their needles. I have an entire set of the shorty squares and the long tip squares, because you can buy maybe not everyone knows, but you can buy tips of needles in different lengths. So depending on where it hits you on your hand and what you prefer to knit with. So I have the shorts also for the shorter 13-inch. You have to have a shorter tip because you can't bend it enough to get it in a circle. But I also have double points that are square, and those are the ones that I would choose to use over anything else. Now, that being said, I use a lot of different needles, and I have some signature double points for socks. But I'm mostly a sweater knitter, and I just really find that the square needles give me very little hand pain. I can knit for a long period of time with those. And I recommend them to like a lot of new knitters too. They're inexpensive to buy a whole set. You can get them on sale oftentimes. So I just recommend them to people a lot. And I do start new knitters out mostly on wood needles, because that's what I use. And they look at my needles and then they'll say, well, how come your needles are like that? So when the library where I teach beginning knitters what to buy, I send them the same link every time. The cheapest wooden needles that the library can get, because the people use them and then give them back at the end of the class. They have to buy their own needles after class is over. So yeah, wood and metal, two different viewpoints on needles. How long have we known each other? 5 years.
Yep.
It'll be this month. We're having an anniversary. How has podcasting changed things in your life day to day, if at all?
So I mentioned yesterday that I think the biggest thing that in my everyday knitting life is that I try to be cognizant of what I'm choosing, and I'll try to pick a free pattern occasionally with the paid pattern, so that not everybody's priced out. Not everybody has money to buy every new pattern that comes out. So I try to pick a free pattern every now and again as well. And then also something big that changes is, especially since I'm not podcasting as regularly, I don't give anyone their finished objects until I've been able to show them off. And so like Heidi has that blanket that I just showed that's finished. I let her cover up with it for like 2 nights. And I said, no, now it needs washed, because I needed to wash it because I finished it, and dogs laid on it while I was working on it. And, I needed to get it laundered. And now she can't have it until I podcast again. So that has changed a little bit, because before I was podcasting, everyone would snap their projects, the second the last end was woven in, and they would run away with it. So from my day-to-day life, it would be the messages and I love getting messages from people. They make me smile. I'm just not able to reply to all of them because there are a lot of them. And so I try to reply to the ones that I can, that maybe aren't able to be Googled. I try to, always help if it's not an answer that you could find on the internet easily, or if it's something someone's wanting to know, like, oh, what was that thing that you recommended? I always try to answer, but I read them all, and they almost always make me smile and laugh. So I do love getting the messages. It's just, that is something I do try to do every day, is read them and answer them. So that would be what has changed for me.
Yeah, with the huge amount of followers that you have, that significantly went up for you to being almost a burden sometimes.
Sometimes.
And I'm just going to put this out there. Sometimes I think, why are you asking me this? They will ask me something that I will have to Google to send them the answer back. And I think, could you just have Googled it? Like, the first thing that you need to do is Google your question before answering it. Now, that being said, I love having conversations with people. I don't have nearly as many.
Yeah. But those are the ones that I don't always get around to answering to, right? Like, if it's something they
could look up on their own.
Right. How do you do a provisional cast on? Yeah. Those I don't have
exactly.
time.
And you just, it just makes you laugh. And I think part of that is because we feel approachable. Hopefully that is all. I always think to myself, well, that's because they feel like they could ask you, Cori. So, you should answer it.
But I also have numerous times. Do you remember the gal who was having trouble with the Vera Valimaki shawl that I knit, and I drew photos, step-by-step photos But then she got it and she was so happy and so thankful because she got help. And then what was it? Last week I had a question about making masks and I did videos, like 60-second videos, like 13 of them, and sewed a mask along because it was a gal who I have, talked to for a lot of years and was happy to help her. So yeah, I do try to help when I can, but that is something that, the time commitment of messages is probably the biggest thing that has changed for me.
Yeah, I definitely see that, because I can spend several hours every morning doing email when I get up, and I really look forward to it. I look forward to going into the office and sitting down and starting my day with the Ravelry messages, any email from my website, as well as just email addresses. And then I do all the YouTube comments, which takes an inordinate amount of time every time right after I podcast. For the next couple of days, it's several hours where I'm sitting and thinking of answers and trying to be, thoughtfully responsive to people. So that is one thing that has changed in my day-to-day life. But the other thing is that I keep notes now about everything. If I see inspiration, if I see someone explaining something well, if I see something that is kind of intriguing to me that I'd like to look into, I have scraps of paper and notes, and then they all hibernate into this room where they're stacked up with things that I could talk about on the podcast. Because the number one thing that I try really hard to do is not make the podcast the same every time, or for it to get to be a repetitive thing that I'm doing every single podcast, where I'm talking about one sweater and then I talk about one shawl and then I tell a story and then I'm done. Like there has to be something in it for me and for the people who are watching that's different. So I'm always trying to, and that's why I've done a couple of really crazy videos in the last couple of months, because I just felt like I needed to kind of provide some humor in this crazy time. And I went outside and knit in the snowstorm, in the blizzard, and then last time I was baking with expired yeast, just to kind of make people laugh, and then my daughter keeps me humble by saying, yeah, Mom, it's okay, but you're not that funny. She's like, I don't really get the expired yeast thing. I was like, oh, funny. You will when you're older. That's what I always tell her. When you grow up. She's 23. So then she rolls her eyes at me even more. But, and then for me also, and I know some people ask about podcasting, I have to set aside an entire day every other week. So on Mondays, every other week, the entire day is a podcast. I do all my emails in the morning to make sure there's nothing new that I need to answer on the podcast. But then I just click into, and I talked about that exclusively on the podcast a couple ago. So kind of how my day goes that day. So it does take a lot of time. I think both of us had to invest a little bit in learning the technology. Yeah. Learning the lighting, learning the sound, like that's all a thing. So, but that's day-to-day life. Okay, this was a funny one yesterday. Good question. Whoever asked this. You're on a deserted island. What 5 things do you take? Have fun.
Okay, so we decided yesterday that our family was one thing, because I immediately said Rick, RJ, Heidi, and those were 3 of my things. So my family and my pets, 1 and 2. I would want to take knitting with an unlimited amount of yarn. So I'm going to need some kind of magical thing that just continues to throw yarn out, because I'm going to need to knit constantly. And I suppose, I didn't say this before, I suppose if I wasn't able to have unlimited yarn, I would need my spinning wheel, because then I could spin yarn from something. So maybe I need a sheep.
Oh yeah, you got smarter in a day. Good for you.
I did. Yeah. And then I would want to be able to listen to audiobooks. So my family, my pets, and included in my pets, I'm going to have to get a new sheep. So my dogs, my cats, my sheep, pets, my spinning wheel, knitting needles, and audiobooks. There we go.
I said yes to Amber's bringing her 3 people as her family, because we're going to get stranded, with our families. But if I want to have fun on a deserted island, then I have to take Kylie, because she makes me laugh of all the people in my life, which is, great to have a child who has a quirky sense of humor, but she's quick-witted, and she'll catch me saying something and she'll be all over it. And I need to laugh. I need to take her. And I said, I'm not so sure about my husband having him because there wouldn't be a vacuum on a desert island and he would not be able to survive without being able to clean up after me. That's one of his full-time daytime chores is doing the laundry, cleaning up the kitchen, and vacuuming every night when he gets home from work. He's just a little bit of a neatnik. He has a little bit of that compulsion in him. And so, if he couldn't sweep the sand on the beach, he'd probably not be a whole lot of fun to live with. But absolutely taking a long yarn. And I know we get asked eventually, like what our favorite yarn is or whatever, but I'd have to have some Malabrigo on that island. For the price point, the colorways are so, the depth of color for Malabrigo is always something that I just kind of am thrilled about when I see it in the store.
Nobody asked in these questions that we asked for, nobody asked what our favorite yarn was, but we'll throw that one in. I have so many favorite yarns that would be hard for me. So I go through kicks where I like tonal yarns and I like speckled yarns. I'm currently on my self-striping kick because in January I sat down and cranked out a lot of sock tubes that I'm now finishing into finished pairs. And I went almost all stripes because if you look at my yarn wall, it just looks like yarn, colorful yarn, but the vast majority of it is self-striping yarn, which it's because I'm primarily a sock knitter. And so that doesn't stress me out. But come on, right? Like it needs to be used. And so I will give you 4 favorite yarns. Kirby Werby, not only because her stripes are good, but she is fantastic. And her child is glorious. Knitterly Things, stripes are amazing and color fast. Nomadic Yarns, Ashley, has all the colors. It's crazy how many colorways she has. And I mean, Joanna from Knit Spin Farm is my other favorite self-striping. I think I got probably my top 4 in that.
Self-stripers, yeah.
So give me a couple. Malabrigo.
Yeah, Malabrigo. Like I'll go into a yarn store and I'll see yarns, from 20 feet away and walk over and I'll pick it out and it'll be Malabrigo. Like it's like a beacon. It just, especially Rios. I think the worsted weight and the depth of color in those just really speaks to me, but definitely Leading Men Fiber Arts. I really like Steve and Andy. I've done a couple of designs with them and worked a little bit with them over the years and hopefully will continue to do so because I just really like, and then Jeanette, Sun Valley Fibers. Yes. I did a number of sweaters and things with her yarn. I think she has a great color palette and their whole backstory is amazing. The farm and George doing the dyeing and Jeanette starting the business, but then George kind of doing it and going to work. She goes, she's a court reporter and so we got to know them. So I have like a personal connection there to their yarn.
And if you can't find a color between Jeanette and Steve and Andy, it probably doesn't exist with all the colors that they both have.
Right. And I would say that both Sun Valley and Leading Men Fiber Arts do what they do well, but they don't do everything. Like they're not huge self-stripers. They do, some. They're not huge speckle people. They do some. They have their tonals, so I think that they have kind of a niche there for kind of for me, what was kind of the standby sweater yarn. I could very easily tell you the yarns that I dislike.
Right.
I'm just not a fan of anything with a hair in it, a fiber that sticks out like mohair, alpaca. I have a really hard time knitting with it because I'm picky about the little, gotta pick that off. Tweed. I like the yarn. It's the knitting of it. Like I'm compulsive about when I get a little bump and then I have to look at it and then I'm like, oh yeah, I think that I could pick that off. It's ridiculous.
I interrupted your 4th
I think that
you were going to say.
Oh yeah, I don't know that I had 4. There are, a number of other yarn places that I go to buy yarn. I'm really right now partial to the Toad Hollow ladies. I
They
think
do.
what they're doing with books and colorways with books, because I love reading and I was an English teacher. So, you know, and the speckles, which is completely different from some of the other yarns that I have mostly used. But then, you know, my love of Ella Ray.
Yes.
Because I encouraged you to buy tubs of it.
Yes.
I think Ella Ray.
It's wonderful. I was going to say, and the Toad Hollow lady, something else that's really nice is, and this is going to be the same, I have found on a lot of Etsy sellers and indie dyers, is, and I've said this earlier on in my podcast, is it never hurts to ask. The answer might be no. You know, if you need something and you need a custom order or you need help with something, reach out and ask. Again, the answer might be no. You know, you might not get help, or they might not be able to help you with what you need, but you can always ask. And I asked them for help this past Christmas. I was making RJ's girlfriend a hat, and I wanted something lightly colored that wasn't white, because that, well, first of all, that's difficult to find in a wool yarn anyway, but I didn't just want a flat undyed yarn. And they recommended a color called New Jersey Beaches. And so if you like super light neutral tonal colors, head over and look at that. Toad Hollow yarns, and it was called New Jersey Beaches, like NJ Beaches. And it was fabulous. It was like a natural color that had tiny specks of just tiny bits of tan in it, like sand. And it was just the perfect hat for the teenage girl, right? Like, it was really good. I really like the Toad Hollow ladies as well. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. But, and then Ella Ray, if you see Ella Ray dying in the back of a yarn store, go save it and buy it. You'll never regret it. Some of it has been discontinued. So the Ella Ray Superwash Chunky, I have bags of it. I just absolutely love that yarn. I've knit numerous sweaters and hats and things out of, I have a couple of different weights of their yarn too. It doesn't pill a lot. It doesn't have that depth of color, but it can be tonal. There can be some highs and low lights in it. And it's like my favorite workhorse yarn. I'm knitting with it right now. And it's just a gem to knit with. I'm using it for my Ursa sweater. And
the heathered colorways are my favorite of theirs.
Yeah. I just really like it. But it's not easy to find some of the bulky anymore. It's been discontinued, but I have seen it in clearance bins in different places and online in clearance. And so I just Google, and then how many do you have? Okay, send them all. Because I do like them.
Okay, what is our next question? You ask it and then you answer it, because I have to mute and holler down the stairs for a second. So, okay, I'm going to listen and find out what it is.
How do you all hold your yarn when doing color work? I knit continental.
You do yours first.
Yep. So if I'm doing color work, I knit with one strand in my right hand and one strand in my left. I originally learned how to knit throwing with my right hand. So kind of dropping my knitting, wrapping with my right hand. And then I saw my knitting teacher at the time, who was knitting with the yarn in her left hand, and she went faster than I went. And so I asked her in a class, I want to learn how to knit like that because it seems faster. And she gave me the typical, it's not always about speed, Cori, answer to that question. But she said, if you really want to learn how to knit continental or pick your yarn, holding it in your left hand, then you just have to do it. You have to, I'll show you the stitch, and then you have to commit to knitting an entire body of a sweater in the round and stockinette using that stitch. So I only learned how to knit at first, and picking the yarn, because in color work, most of the time, there aren't purl stitches that you need to contend with, unless you're, if you're knitting in the round. And so she taught me, and I knit the whole body of a wallaby in a class that I was taking from her, and just, I picked the whole way. And by the time I got to the, underarms of that, and I had it down, and I was not my, fallback. It was now then my go-to. So I easily learned how to do that. I think it's a little bit harder to learn how to pick pick your pearls. And I've taken a couple of different classes for Norwegian purl, but I would just tension my yarns the same way, right and left. And that's different from the way Amber does it. Amber does it the way that Arnie and Carlos talk about. So
I hold my yarn uniquely. I don't knit continental or what's the other one? English?
Yep. Throwing and picking.
I don't do either one the way that you would think. So I was a crocheter before I was a knitter, and in crochet, you hold your yarn in your left hand, not in your right hand. And so like I'm crocheting right now, and I'm using that left hand to throw the yarn over. And so when I learned to knit, I took a quick class at a local library, and you know, I didn't have someone sitting there with me. I had them for an hour, right? And then, so I just went home and finished learning kind of on my own. And so I hold my yarn the same way when I knit. I keep my yarn in my left hand. I hold onto my knitting project just like this. And when I insert my knitting needle, I throw with that left hand, just with my thumb and my forefinger. So it's super strange. Now, I have seen a number of people that do it the same way that I do. But it's still not what people would consider normal. Now, there is no normal. You can hold your yarn and your needle however you want, right? It doesn't matter, as long as your stitch you're happy with them at the end. But because of that, because I hold my yarn in my left hand and throw it over like that, I drop my yarn and I pick up the color that I need. So if it's 3 white stitches and a red stitch, I'm going to hold my white yarn for 3 stitches. I'm going to drop it, pick up my red for 1, drop it, pick up my white. And so, yeah, that's, which is a slower process, but I will say I don't have issues with tension. My color work is never bumpy or ripply. Like some people, I'll see them knitting and I'll think, okay, I'm going to grab a color work sweater that you want to see anyway, and I'll show you because I've got it out. But some people will be knitting and they'll say, I sure hope this blocks out. I've never understood that in my knitting because it doesn't, there's nothing to need to block out because it's all flat.
Yeah. You're not carrying that yarn tightly across the back. And that's what causes yarn dominance. I have to carry my non-dominant yarn in my left hand if I want it to pop forward. Oh, look at that.
So this is the sweater that I'm working on for Rick for Christmas. It looks too small. It's not. You know, anytime I knit anything in color work, whether it's a hat or mittens or what, I always think it's going to be too small. But I have measured it, excuse me, and measured it, and it is not. This is an all-over color work sweater knit on size 2 needles, which sometimes there are 3 stitches per row. Or 3 colors per row. But see, it mostly lays completely flat. There's no buckling.
Yeah.
Or puckering on it at all. Oh, I'm pulling stitches out. Well, it's Jameson. It's not going anywhere. It's about the wooliest wool you could use. But yeah, it's really a fun sweater. It's got a touch of yellow in it, which seemed really bizarre whenever you think about a Christmas sweater, but it's almost like it's faded, you know, like it. Anyway, I really like it. And I am 1 full. So where am I at? I'm right here, up here. So I'm like, you know, I just finished this band right here, and I have 1 more repeat to go, and I'm to the underarms. And the inside is beautiful. Look at this. I love a color work sweater.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if you'll notice when I'm holding it up, this is kind of flipping a little bit. There's a trick out there somewhere. I don't know if you told me or if I read it on the internet. You can pick up stitches in your cast on and knit a few rows and then tack it down, and that will not flip up. So once I've blocked this, if that edge still flips up, I will do that trick, because this sweater will be too much of like an heirloom piece to have it flip up, and you have to deal with that. So anyway, but yeah, that is how I knit color work, is I pick up and drop each stitch, and I'm really excited about this. It's beautiful. And I've been weaving in the ends. Any of you who have known me for any length of time know that that is my nemesis. I've been weaving them in as I go because it's a woolly wool. None of them are clipped, but they've all been woven in. And so like all these little bits I can trim once it's blocked, because they've all been woven in for a very lengthy period, you know, like a lot of stitches.
Yeah.
It's exciting. I love it. Anyway, next.
Okay. Amber, how many grams of yarn do you crank into
Okay, you cut out, but I know the question, so I'll just say it again. They asked how many grams of yarn I crank in 2 tubes when I make socks on my sock machine, right?
Yep.
Okay, it depends on the person. I will always crank 50 grams. If it's for me and Heidi, I will only crank 50 grams because then I will use what's left over to finish my cuffs, my heels, and my toes. Or I'll use a contrast color, but there's no reason to crank out 100 grams of yarn when I know that Heidi and I require, you know, maybe an 11-inch tube to have socks that we like, you know, that fit perfectly. For the boys, it would be a little bit more. For RJ, I probably crank 60 grams. And for Rick, I thought about that. I'm going to change my answer from yesterday. And for Rick, I would probably crank like 70 grams because he wants his socks as long as I can. I don't think the man has calves, like, because he doesn't require increases. So he just puts it on, and his ankle, it's like the same length or the same width, all circumference all the way to his knee, right? And so he just wants tube sock or like knee socks for everything, as high as I will get, as high as I'm willing to make them. So yeah, so no less than 50 grams, and I would say anywhere between 50 and 70. Now that's not to say that's all the yarn that I'll use, because then I will add contrasting heels, toes, and cuffs. But yeah, if I'm sitting and cranking, or if I were going to be making a pair of those afterthought everything socks where you're hand knitting a tube, I would probably hand knit a 50-gram tube and then start with the other bits. Okay.
Yeah. What do you both do to maintain your special friendship from a distance?
I don't remember what we said yesterday.
We talked on the phone a lot.
Yeah, we do that.
So we talked about our stay-at-homedness, how it's easy for me to be in touch with you because you stay home. Like you're a homebody. You really like being in your home and you're not out running around all the time. So almost at any hour of the day, if I text and say, hey, I'm going to sit down and knit for a bit, I sit better if I'm talking to Amber. I'm not a great sitter at home during the day. I will get up and get on the computer. I'll be on Instagram. I'll go look in the freezer for something for dinner. I get just highly distractible. I have trouble. And I think that's just like the sitting and letting my mind wander bit. So even if I watch TV during the day, it's not the same as at night. So I will text Amber and say, hey, can we chat? And we will be on FaceTime for several hours. I have watched her cook dinner. She has watched me cook dinner while we're on FaceTime. You know,
if we have to go to the bathroom, just say, hang on. And we just go, like we leave the phone and then we go. And then sometimes we'll take bathroom breaks at the same time, which sounds ridiculous, right? So I'm sure people are going to be like, how can they do that? But it's not work. That's what's nice is I can be myself. I can complain if I want to complain. I can be happy if I'm happy. I can be sad if I'm sad. And that's like a true friendship, right? Like I don't have to be like, well, I really wish I could talk about this. I can if I want to. I can say whatever I want. And that's really nice. And yeah, the only time I'm really, because you're never going to find me in a mall, right? I'm not going to a mall to shop or do anything. So really the only time I'm not available is if I'm working to fill in for someone else. And at that point, you would have already known it because I would have already complained about it. So yeah.
And we are both huge talkers, like huge talkers. I can open my mouth and I can just go on and on and on and on and on. And Amber is the same way. And if she says to me, have I told you this story before? I'll say, doesn't matter. Go ahead. She'll tell me again. Like I'm fine with listening. And so there aren't odd pauses, because we both just like to talk so much. And part of that, you learn who can tolerate that when they're around you, right? Like I had to learn that my daughter is an introvert, right? And she just gets really sucked down when there's a lot of people around her talking like that. And so it was a thing that I had to learn. And I told Amber yesterday, this is confessions of a knitting group knitter, but when I go to my knitting group, even in the last 6 to 7 years, which I've been in the same knitting group forever, I say to myself in the car, don't talk too much. Don't take up the whole 2 hours with chatting, because I'll tell everybody about my entire day. And that isn't good for all people, but for Amber, it's fine. Yeah. And for me, it's fine, right? If you want to chatter on to us at length, we will be fine with that, because we get filled up with people's chatter. Like I get off the phone and I have more energy as opposed to being like drained and feeling like, oh, that was so much work. That isn't how it is with us. And so I think and we haven't been doing that our whole friendship. Like we didn't start
years.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it just was not that way.
I think it started when you were knitting or working on your book, because you would need help with a question. You'd have a math question, or you'd say, hey, can you do, not that I'm the person you should ask, but like I was the person who was available.
Say it out loud.
Yeah. And so, I can do math on a calculator too, right? And so, I think that is when we kind of started the whole, hey, can I FaceTime you for a quick second and show you something and see what you think? And then it just kind of went from there.
Yeah. It developed over time. And in the last year, now we talk all the time, which is why when my husband walked in yesterday from being upstairs, because he was working from home, he said afterwards, I thought you were just talking to Amber. And I was like, no, we were recording. I told you yesterday we were recording. I was snippy with him. Let's be honest, but right? Like, how husbands can hoover sometimes. And that was all on me because I was frustrated because the Zoom hadn't recorded and we were doing the second recording. And then he was in there and I said, well, you're just going to interrupt our recording? And he's like, I didn't know you were recording. I thought you were just talking to her. And then that recorded too. So then you got
Did
to
you
see
figure out how to cut it off?
Yeah, I cut it off. It would have been funny because everyone would have been like, oh, she just kind of bitched at her husband. But that's the moment that I had yesterday, which he's so easygoing. So I'm sure it just rolled right off of him, but he didn't know. He didn't remember because I do talk to you often. He didn't remember that I said the recording. And I was on Zoom 3 times yesterday because we did the morning, then the library knitters got on and I was on with them for, an hour of 2 hours because I set up their Zoom meeting. And then we did another one. So I talked all day and he was just upstairs going, yeah, this is how she spends her days, which is not true. It's not how I spend every day. And then we also try to make attempts to get together very periodically. Like we do. Amber has come here a lot. I need a trip to Southern Illinois to the small
there is
town.
A lot up by you too. And so, you are more than welcome, but I have nothing more to offer than just me, right? Where up there by you, we can make plans, which is fine. It doesn't matter.
We pick knitting events to go to as well, like Stitches. I always met you at Stitches or Rhinebeck or January Thaw or wherever, whatever we are going off to. So that's kind of how we do it. And it just works for us right now. I will also say it might not work for us forever. Like, as we move forward, Amber might have to go back to work. That, becomes an issue. Then I don't get to talk to her as much. The other thing that we shared yesterday is that we will abruptly say goodbye.
Yeah. Right.
I will say, Ross is home. Boom. And I'll just bluntly, she could be in the middle, halfway through a sentence, and she will say the same thing. Kids are coming up the stairs. Bye. Right. And it's fine because we know we'll text later or we'll talk to each other in a day or two. Whenever the other person has to go, we just go.
Do you remember when I thought RJ was breaking quarantine? We were talking and I thought my son was breaking quarantine and I just dropped everything and ran to the window. And you were like, what's wrong? Because the look on my face, he was going to work, but I thought he was leaving. Now, the most absurd thing about that is he would never do that. He often says to me, why do you always assume I'm going to do the worst thing when I've literally never let you down like that? And he hasn't. He has never one time done anything that has disappointed me from a behavior standpoint. Okay, he may have pushed his sister when he was little, right? But since he's been an independent kid making decisions on his own, leaving the house, he has never, that I know of, that he has gotten in trouble for, right? He may have secretly done something that would have disappointed me, but he's never gotten caught doing anything that disappointed us. And so it cracks him up every time at 10, his curfew is 11, which is very early for a almost 18-year-old child, but it's late enough, right?
Nothing good happens after midnight.
How PG is this? I've always said the only thing open after midnight are legs and the ER. So he doesn't need to be out doing, no, you're not going to be out there after 11. And so he comes home, and at 10:58, I'm sitting there and I'm like looking at my watch, and he'll say, Mom, because he'll get home before curfew every time. But I'm worried every time he's going to break it, and he has not broken curfew in 2 years. So it's just so funny that he always says, I don't know why you always assume I'm going to do
that. Has a little bit to do with you as a,
say again?
That has a little bit to do with you as a naughty teenager.
Yes.
You were a little naughty as a teenager?
Yeah, I was.
So
yeah.
You know what you were thinking and how you might have tried to get away with something.
Yeah.
And so you're looking back historically at your own checkered past saying,
Yeah, because even my family, even though it wasn't all me, my brother was a drinker. My sister had a baby in high school. I wasn't home a lot. Like, I was always out running around. I wasn't doing bad things like they were doing bad things, but I probably wasn't just sitting and doing my homework, right? So yes, you're right. I'm looking at me, my brother, and my sister and all the things that we did and got away with, because Mom might watch this, so I'm not going to say anything, but some of the things that I did that they don't know about, right? So yeah, you're right. I'm taking that internal stuff, and projecting it on my children. Absolutely.
Well, that's what we all do.
Right.
So, okay, next question, because I have to get off here. Any advice for starting a podcast blog, either craft related or not? And so what I said yesterday is both Amber and I do our podcast on iMovie, and we do iMovie editing on our iPads, and we do minimal editing, but it is something you really have to learn. It takes a little technology to get that down. Learning about lights and sound took a little bit of time for me. Like, I put my first one up, but then my sound was a little off. And so I invested in a tiny little microphone and some lights to help with that. But I think if you have something you need to say, like if you feel like you have something to add to the community, you should go for it. Go for it. I personally, when I started my podcast, didn't want to do the same podcast that everyone else was doing. I really wanted to try to do something different, something fresh. So I'm teaching. I'm basically doing the teaching that I love to do, where I travel from my home. And that has been working out really well for me. And when Amber first started, she was doing tutorials.
Another little tip that has absolutely nothing to do with that, but Cori on her iPad puts a little sticky note that says, look here, and it points at the camera, because people, like, a lot of times I haven't been looking at the camera during this because I'm like, well, it's Zoom and I'm looking at you, right? But I'm not making eye contact with the camera like I should be. So she puts a little sticky note that says, look here, and points, because people really like it when you look into the camera and not away. So there's
and when you're videoing on an iPad, which is what we both use, the screen is this big and I can look at the center of it and be looking at the center of my face, but the camera is literally over here. So if I don't remember to constantly look, and then right now I'm having eyeglass trouble, so I'm constantly using my bifocals to see, so I'm tilting my head back. But like, people will point that out for you. So we need to be upfront about that part too, is the things that they don't like about you, they're probably going to let you know.
They'll say.
I don't have a whole lot of trouble with that. I don't have as big a following as Amber, but Amber can get some really negatives.
I do. I don't get many anymore because I have said, listen, don't make those ugly comments. And a lot of people have stopped doing it. But I can easily say ignore it, but you don't ignore it, right? It hurts every time you get one of those ugly messages, but it speaks more to them than it does to you. And so, if you've got a whole lot of people who really like your podcast and one person who doesn't, then, it's more about that person than it is about you. So, but it is something you kind of have to toughen up a tiny bit before you put yourself out there, but I don't want that to be discouraging, because I love it when people start new podcasts. I think that there's plenty of room for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. And if you want to start, something that's not craft related, that's more power to you. Go out and do that too. There are lots of tutorials out on YouTube for places that will teach you how to start a podcast. You do not have to pay for a service to do that. You do not have to buy different platforms and things. The iMovie platform on the computer is much more versatile than what it is in the app, but I don't want to learn it. I don't want to take the time to add all the fancy stuff, right? Because it already takes me, you know, too long to do what I'm doing now, which is minimal editing. So that's something that you might want to think about.
Okay, how many questions do we have left? Do we need to rapid fire answer them? Because I know you have an appointment.
I'm not sure how many we have left because we run into tomorrow's questions and I just tried to count them. What's your favorite summer recipe?
Okay, we talked about this. I don't have a lot of favorite summer recipes. My family's super picky, but my favorite refreshing thing that only I eat, so I usually only eat it at my mom and dad's, is cucumbers and onions in vinegar, which if you've never heard of that, maybe that's a Midwestern thing. So if you haven't heard of that, if you just Google that, cucumbers and onions in vinegar, it will pop up. Some people add tomatoes, and it's delicious. I really, really like that. And then I also really like to grill out. Well, we're going to try and get these done. So yeah.
I posted in Instagram this week that we were making shish kebabs on the grill, and Western dressing is a really Midwest thing, but we use Western dressing, and some people had never heard of it, but we marinate. It's a thicker, different tasting. It's not French. It's orange dressing, but it doesn't taste like French. Similar, but and I love pasta salad. So I have a California Pizza Kitchen chopped salad off the internet that is delicious. It makes a huge bowl. It's really refreshing. And then I also have a couple of like ring pasta salads with little shrimp in them and cucumbers and radishes. That's really fresh. We're not quite at summer yet. We're having another kind of cooler day today. It's beautiful, sunny, but cooler. So we haven't gotten into the 100% grilling thing, but yeah, pasta salads, grilling, that makes me happy. The next one is, might you consider, and Amber did an entire podcast on wool wash. It says wool wash at the beginning of the podcast, and she went over all the different types. I use whatever is in the back room. I buy little bottles of it at different yarn stores. I go to different kinds to try, and I don't have a preference. There's not one that I absolutely have to use every time. I've used all of them.
You cut out just a little bit. That question was if we would talk about wool washes and which ones were our favorites. And yeah, your answer was fine, but the question cut out, but I knew which one you were talking about. Yeah, it was very early on, I would say in my first 10 episodes, and it says in the title, wool wash. And I think I talked about maybe 8 different ones, bars, liquids, fragrance-free ones. Yeah, so that will be just a multitude of information for you if you want to head back and look at that on the Yarnhoarder podcast on YouTube.
Who is your favorite designer?
That one was tough. I don't have a favorite designer because, and we talked about, I had a reason why, and Cori has a reason why, and hers also applies to me. But what I said was that I like to knit a lot of plain vanilla things. I knit plain vanilla socks, which I don't have a pattern for. I'll knit a cardigan, which is just a plain cardigan. And while I love looking at cables and lace and all of the things, and like, I really love all of Thea Coleman's cabled sweaters. I love all the sweaters from, who is the guy that Matt knits all the Brooklyn tweed patterns? Is that Jared Flood?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love all of those, but I'm not knitting them because I always tend to lean towards the mindless knitting instead. And so it's hard for me to pick a favorite designer that I want to knit. And I mentioned yesterday, one of my favorite designers to look at their photos and their designs and their eclecticness and their way of coming up with things, the way their brain works, is Stephen West, because I love seeing what and how that stuff comes out of his head. I have no idea. And then his styling of them always makes me want it, even though I would never wear it. And so it's just not my style. But I'm not a big shawl wearer. So anyway, and I think I said, I love the pattern socks, Cookie A and Paper Daisy Creations. And they all, so many gorgeous sock knitter or sock designers, but I tend to always gravitate towards the vanilla sock. So, and then Cori.
yeah, the type of knitter that I am is I always want to try something new and different. So I'm always looking for people who are kind of pushing the envelope, are going to teach me how to do a new technique. So I don't usually gravitate toward one designer in that way. Plus, both Amber and I are really kind of eclectic, and we don't have a super classy personal sense of style that is like trim and fitted, and
right.
We're more about color and pattern and wild. Like I bought a dress last week. I ordered a dress and it has like superhero terms on it, like pow, wham, bang. And I sent Amber a picture and she was like, it's great. But if I would have sent that to everyone else, people would have been like, you bought that to wear? That's my sense of style, or cute or different, over the top. Yeah. And I don't always wear it every day. It doesn't have to be an everyday thing, but that's what I'm looking for in a designer. And so although I love, you know, all the top popular designers, I love following them and seeing what they're coming out with, I'm not going to sit down and knit one of their every single pattern that they come out. Like we talked about Stephen West, right? Like I can just be in awe of all those amazing, colorful shawls that he's putting out and the brioche stitches that he's using, but I'm not going to knit all of those shawls, which I like him as a designer, but I don't have like a favorite person that I say it has to be. Like even Amber doesn't knit all my stuff, right? Like my friends don't all knit my designs. And that is normal. Like I have eclectic sense, so I don't think I have necessarily an aesthetic that someone would follow and say, I'm going to knit everything she ever designs. It's not the way I work, but I know there are people out here who knit, you know, every single thing Hokie puts out, they're going to knit. Every Stephen West shawl, they're going to knit it. They're going to do every mystery knit along by this one person because they trust that person. Yep. And I can't do a mystery knit along to save my soul. I need to know what it's going to look like, people. Yep. So, okay. Now, also I'm getting text messages from my husband asking me if I can talk. So,
what do you want to just do? Want to do one more and wrap it up? That way you can call. Okay.
Yeah.
So pick your favorite.
I think we're almost done. There's the one about socks. I did a whole sock episode, and Amber does socks every episode. Do you know what we started with in episode 2 yesterday?
I remember.
I don't either. So
we can just be done because you need to go to the bathroom and get a drink before you start your next.
Let's just end with which of you influences one the other the most. I don't know if that was today or yesterday, but we don't have a sense of influence over each other. We're both highly opinionated women with strong senses of self.
Yes.
And, you know, like I'm not super confident in that way about myself, but I have a sense of who I am. And if everybody loves something, that doesn't mean I have to love it in that sense. That's what I'm talking about with like a strong sense of self. I can kind of march to my own drummer a little bit.
Yeah,
may not be a good thing.
And we can help each other spend our money as far as that much goes. But just because Cori buys something, I don't have to run right out and buy it. And the same would go. Like she's going to gravitate more towards, you know, earthy oranges and raspberries, and I'm going to want a pale pink and a gray. And, you know, it's completely different opposite ends of the spectrum there. And so I don't know that we influence each other as far as our yarn purchasing goes, but we are each other's biggest cheerleaders when we're wanting to spend money. Yes, do it.
True that. And we did both buy the Kate Celine yarn last week and post that on Instagram. So I will get this uploaded, and then I'll put up both parts. This first part might feel really off to people because we did it yesterday and we feel like we know what we said. And so it might not be as
polished as the other one was.
It might be a little more distinct than we actually talked about yesterday, but you'll have something to watch, and it gave us something to do. So we will put these up and appreciate everyone watching. What?
I was going to say good luck tonight. Cori has his thing. Yeah, but I guess by the time this is up, it'll already be over.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.